I just check with the technical team whether we are ready to start? Brilliant.
We are indeed as well. Sorry, so the only people that will be on screen will be the three of you, so
right.
We're away.
Okay.
So you may as well begin.
Lovely. Brilliant. Well, bonjour, hola, guten tag, chiarete, hello to everybody. And thank you very much for joining us at our hustings for the selection of our London mayoral candidate. I'd also like to wish members of the Jewish community Shana Tova. It's Rosh Hashanah this weekend, and we are delighted that hopefully you'll be able to join us when we release this again as a recording later on. I am the Vice President of the Liberal Democrat Party, and I will be chairing today's event. And I would just like William Houngbo, who is my colleague who you can see on screen, to introduce himself and to explain what his role is going to be today.
Hello, bonjour everyone. I'm Councillor William Houngbo from London Bridge, West Mersey in Sadok. I'm assisting Isabelle today in this interview. My role would be mainly to look at the chart and identify interesting questions and interesting comments that we will share together, and Luisa would comment on. I'm also working in a team of Isabelle most of the time. I'm assisting her, and this is a good opportunity to be with you all this afternoon.
Lovely. And last but not least for introductions, I'd like to introduce the person who's going for the candidacy, Luisa Porritt. Hello, Luisa.
Hello, Isabelle.
And Luisa, you are a former MEP, member of the European Parliament, and a councillor in Camden. That's correct, isn't it?
Indeed.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for being here today, Luisa, and I'm sure everyone's going to be very excited to get to know you. You can relax for the next few minutes, you'll be pleased to know, because I'm now going to run through Zoom etiquette and some of the format of today, so you can take a breather at the moment.
Right.
So for the sake of everyone who's on the call, albeit you are not visual, you're not on video, this session is being recorded, and we hope to be able to release it or have it accessible for those who are not able to join us today. If you are wanting to ask questions, please use the chat box, which William will be monitoring. I know in previous hustings, sometimes when we've had it on YouTube or live via any other means, that you've sometimes put questions in the chat that I haven't necessarily seen. So we've listened to that feedback, and William is here to manage all of that for us today. So thank you for that, William. For security reasons, I will only say your first name if you put a question into the chat or a comment. And I'd ask that you keep questions as brief and uncomplicated as possible, just so that we can give as much airtime to Luisa for being able to answer them. You can make them complicated and challenging though, so don't worry about that. And we will be keeping to time, just to explain that we are aiming to end by 3:30 today, so that you can get on with the rest of your afternoon whilst pondering quite what to do in terms of voting. And finally, for all three of us who are on screen, we may break eye contact with you on occasion because we're making notes or I'm checking what's happening on messages that are coming to me, etc. So please excuse us if we do break eye contact, but it's because we're doing something essential to the hustings and not because we're checking our phones for other messages or anything like that. So just to explain for those of you who are watching who may not be aware of quite what is happening, we are in the process at the moment of selecting the Liberal Democrat candidate for London Mayor. So our previous candidate stood down and a selection process began again. 2 candidates were shortlisted, 1 candidate is no longer in the selection process, and now we're at the stage where ballot papers will be going out next week. So on the ballot paper, the choice that you will have is Luisa Porritt, or you can vote for a reopening of nominations. So those are the 2 choices, and that's the history of where we're at. And the reason that I'm explaining all of that is because we really want to focus on getting to know Luisa, her policies, and a bit about her background today. So that's what we would like to focus on going forward. Just to say, for those of you who have got questions about how we will be running the campaign and, you know, wanting to put input into that process, there will be an opportunity to do that, but it won't be today. As I've said, we want to focus on questioning Luisa and finding out more about what she thinks about the campaign, etc. But the campaign in general, there will be an event at conference that will be on Saturday, the 26th of September at 4 o'clock. So please have a look at your emails and messages and look online. That will be run by our campaign director for the 2021 campaign, Anoud Al-Samurai. So take a look for that. But in terms of today's format, what will happen just after I've finished speaking is that Luisa will make an opening statement. We will then move on to questions and answers. And we have had many questions sent in, but you can also put your questions in the chat. And William, you've just made a little comment. Would you like to read it out? You're on mute, William.
Yeah, I'm just advising it's better to send the questions to the chat instead of emailing them because I don't have access to the inbox. So please send them to the chat. Thank you.
Brilliant. After the Q&A session, there will be a closing statement by Luisa, and then Luisa, you can relax at that point because we will just summarize and final remarks and thank yous will happen at that point. But do stay tuned to the end because I will be talking about another couple of events that are essential or you would probably really want to attend and be part of if you're a member of the London region. So having said all of that, it would be fantastic to hear from you, Luisa, now. So if you'd like to start with your opening statement, we are all ears.
Okay. Thank you, Isabelle and William, and thank you all for giving up a sunny afternoon to attend this event. As your mayoral candidate, I'll stand up for all of London's diverse communities and bring both our party and Londoners together at a time when societal divisions and a pandemic have forced us apart. It is poignant that this weekend is Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year, a time that is traditionally about reflection and renewal. This is the second time this year that the Jewish community has had to observe a major festival in a different and challenging way, when normally friends and family would gather together. The Muslim, Christian and Sikh communities here in London have faced similar challenges, with important religious holidays observed at home rather than in places of worship. Sadly, we also missed out on the Pride Parade this year, when normally we as Liberal Democrats would be there en masse celebrating the achievements of the equal rights movement and highlighting the work that still needs to be done to make London fully inclusive for the LGBTQ+ community. Next month is also Black History Month, a time to appreciate the amazing contribution of African and Caribbean communities to our tapestry of cultures in London. Though it will be difficult to celebrate Black History Month together, we can still recognise this important annual event. And having been reminded of the significance of the Black Lives Matter movement over recent months, there is still plenty of work we can do to rectify structural racism. Here in London, one of the most diverse, multicultural cities in the world, we as Liberals have an opportunity to set out a vision of a society where every person is valued for who they are. I'm a Londoner through and through. My mother came to this country as an immigrant at secondary school age, after being born in Bermuda and living in Turkey, with my grandmother, who was born in Egypt. I was born in the Royal Free Hospital, where our NHS heroes are at the centre of the battle against this terrible virus that has already taken so many of our loved ones. I've lived in London my whole life, apart from the time I spent living in Paris studying for my master's degree, thanks to EU free movement, a right I've spent the last 4 years fighting for young people to keep, both as a councillor and as an MEP. Growing up in this city, I was fortunate enough to enjoy a lot of the amazing things it has to offer: world-class museums and art galleries, some of the best live music venues, pubs and bars, and restaurants offering every type of food you could dream of. But you can't live here without also seeing the many challenges that too many Londoners face on a daily basis, particularly the rising numbers of people sleeping rough on our streets in recent years. Having a roof over your head is one of the most basic of human rights, and we owe it to those Londoners to fight for their right to dignity and a full and happy life. As a London councillor, I'm constantly approached by residents living in overcrowded accommodation who've been failed by an outdated points system that gives them little hope their circumstances will change. It is a scandal that there are 25,000 homes currently sitting empty across London. These homes need to be brought back into use, and with offices in the centre of London now abandoned, many of them on a permanent basis, there's new space available that could be used to fix this crisis. Meanwhile, the state of our air quality is seriously damaging the health of young and old alike, with more than 9,000 Londoners dying prematurely every year as a consequence. I've lived in London for more than 2 decades, and I'm having to use an inhaler again because of our air pollution. I want us to be the party that calls for urgent action to tackle the climate emergency, so that children growing up in our capital today are not faced with this situation or worse. We also have an opportunity to champion a green revolution for London, linking the need to reboot our economy, which is being devastated by the consequences of COVID-19, to the need to create new, green, 21st century jobs. Ed Davey set this out so eloquently during his leadership campaign, and I will be another strong voice for us to out-green the Green Party. And as the party that believes in fairness and tackling injustice, we have a unique role to play in building trust between the police and the communities they serve. It is often framed in the media as though these divisions are so deep they can never be healed. I don't believe that is true. My brother's a police officer, so is his girlfriend, and I often talk to them both about the need to restore community policing. It's what the police want in order to do their jobs effectively, and it's what local communities want in order to both feel safe and like the police are on their side. And many officers would privately admit they don't need blanket powers for suspicionless stop and search or facial recognition technology, which often incorrectly identifies people anyway. Both measures disproportionately impact Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities. And as your candidate for Mayor of London, I will be joining Ed Davey and Caroline Pidgeon in calling for them to be removed, unlike Labour or the Conservatives. I will also be a voice for London's 1 million EU citizens who add so much to the mosaic that is London, as I've done both as a councillor and an MEP. Our fellow Europeans have been treated terribly by this government, creating the risk of another Windrush generation, another important community in London that deserves a champion for their rights. I will use my platform as your mayoral candidate to continue to call for Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's freedom from unlawful imprisonment in Iran, as I did when I raised her case at the European Parliament. And I'm not going to be doing any of these things alone. We already have a brilliant Liberal Democrat team in place, with our current Assembly member Caroline as our #1 candidate for the list, supported by other brilliant list and constituency candidates, activists, councillors and parliamentary spokespeople, 3 MPs and staff and volunteers already working on the London campaign, as well as staff in HQ. I will harness the relationships that I already have at every level of the party to make sure we deliver our most successful London campaign yet. Having been elected from 3rd place on a London-wide list in last year's European elections, I know our potential as a party when we all pull in the same direction. Though the circumstances are now different, I will rally our members to recreate that buzz and belief in what our campaign can achieve, so the Liberal Democrats can again take London by surprise.
Thank you, Louisa. You have covered so many topics and the chat has gone completely wild. So that was brilliant and well done to you. So I can see that there will be a lot of questions coming in and you've covered so many subjects. So I think a good place to start, actually, bearing in mind you talked about when you were young, you were a student, etc. There will probably be a lot of students of politics who would be interested to know, what are the mayoral powers? So what areas can you cover if you were to be our candidate and eventually elected? And what areas would you not have the remit over?
Thank you very much. I was just making note of that so that I didn't miss anything.
Yes.
So I think one of the most important things about the mayor's role is they're a kind of ambassador for London. And so even the areas that the mayor doesn't have direct control over, they have influence over. And one of the best things that the mayor of London can do is get all the right people around the table to bring about change. So whether that's local councillors from all the 32 London boroughs, the government, of course, are an important actor in all of this, because the mayor can't change everything alone, actually. But what they can do is work with all those different levels of government to bring about change. And indeed, I think one of the areas where Sadiq Khan is letting us down is that he tends to surround himself with kind of former Labour councillors as advisors, and he doesn't have a very inclusive approach to governance. And so, if elected, that's one of the things that I would be seeking to address, to make sure that all voices across all of our London boroughs are heard, that everyone is included. Saying that, the mayor does sit on various boards. For example, the mayor is chair of TfL. We've seen how that's kind of come to the forefront recently with the whole debate over the potential scrapping of free travel for under 18s, which is obviously a really important issue for young people and for their futures. And actually, as Liberal Democrats, I'm really proud of the stance that we're taking on this, because this is one of those situations where both the Labour mayor and a Conservative government are in part to blame. So the Conservatives have imposed a condition that the mayor would say that they didn't really have much choice over as part of the bailout that was given to TfL. But equally, the mayor has agreed to that set of conditions, and I don't think that a Labour mayor especially should ever have done that. So that's one of the things that I would be fighting against in that capacity. And then there are things like housing, where the mayor doesn't have direct control, but actually people don't realise that, and voters often think that they do. And I think that's something that during the course of the campaign, we need to be speaking about more, because there are a number of Labour councils across London, from Brent to Suffolk, that are failing local communities because so many people are living in overcrowded housing or don't have access to decent housing at all.
I'm glad that you've drawn the distinction between what the mayor can and cannot do versus what they can and cannot influence. And I think it's very important in terms of framing what we discuss going forwards. And I think people will be really pleased to have heard what you've just said. So thank you for that, because it does give a guide in terms of questions that are coming in. So the first question that I've got is from Kathy, who's based in Redbridge, and her question is all about public transport. So this is the question: how will you work with communities throughout London to ensure that they have a public transport system that works well for them? So how will you work with communities through London to ensure that they have a public transport system that works well for them? And while you're thinking of your answer, just to explain that because we have got so many questions coming in, it may not be that we're able to group all of the questions together in subject order, but hopefully you'll be able to handle that. But yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, for your question. I think it's a really important one, actually, because we're at a juncture where the way that we get around our capital is changing, of course, because of the pandemic. And actually, a lot of us are less mobile than we used to be, because we're not having to commute to offices as much, and we're kind of staying more in our local neighbourhoods, which in and of itself, although it's under very unfortunate circumstances that we wish were not happening, being more locally and community focused is an opportunity for us to address the problems of air quality across London by reshaping the way that we travel. So, of course, we need a functioning public transport network, and there were too many things that were not working for Londoners before this pandemic hit. But actually, we also need to recognise that people aren't taking tubes and buses as much as they were anymore, which is why TfL is in a mess financially. And so we need to make sure that stations are open and reopened, because a number of them have shut down during the lockdown period. And it's really important that those people that still need access to it can. We need to improve access for disabled people, actually. Here in my home borough of Camden in West Hampstead, we still don't have step-free access to the tube station here. And I think that's disgraceful, frankly, because the mayor's had plenty of time to get that fixed, working with TfL and with the local council. There's the question of public transport that people still need to use, but also the fact that a lot more people are staying in their local areas. And I think we need to make sure that on a local level, we make areas as friendly for people who want to get about by walking or cycling as possible, so that there isn't that temptation to use other modes of transport, particularly cars. Often the reason why Londoners get into their car in the first place, pandemic aside, is because it's hard to get around London. And we've seen some changes being introduced, but I think those need to be sped up. However, they do also need to be done in a way that is in consultation with local communities. I've seen the actions of an overzealous Labour council here that hasn't been consulting local residents or the business community about the impact of changes bringing in low traffic neighbourhoods. And while as a party we support introducing those, we also know that you have to listen to local communities to introduce those changes in a way that is sustainable and that works for them. So I think one of the ways we'll distinguish ourselves is by showing that we actually listen to people and reflect what they care about.
Thanks for that, Louisa. And certainly what you're saying ties in with Ed Davey, our leader, his national listening programme. So it all chimes in and is very coordinated. So that's brilliant. And actually what you've talked about in terms of the drive to, have more reliance on walking, cycling, etc. Drive is probably the wrong word to use, but you get what I mean. It's very timely what you've just said, because on Tuesday the 22nd of September it is World Car Free Day, and so I don't know if you timed that, but that's what's happening. So we could almost start putting that into practice from next week. So that's
Absolutely.
Just interesting. I heard about it on LBC. So yes, plans ahead for that. So you talked a bit, or quite a lot actually, in your opening statement about diversity by mentioning the many days that we have been celebrating, commemorating, and sadly with the George Floyd killing, having to really take a good long look at our society. And one of the questions that has come in is all about diversity. So, and this comes in from somebody who is from Tower Hamlets. And their question is, what will you practically do to engage with diverse communities in London who are underrepresented in the Liberal Democrats? And she's specifically asking about the Bangladeshi community, but you can answer that more broadly. So what will you practically do to engage diverse communities in London who are unrepresented in the Liberal Democrats? And then William, we will come to you after this for finding out what's going on in the chat. So Louisa.
Thank you. Well, as that question has come from Tower Hamlets, I think it would be an oversight for me to not mention Rabina Khan, who is our sole Liberal Democrat councillor in Tower Hamlets and is already doing amazing work engaging with the Bangladeshi community there. And as mayoral candidate, I would work with her to understand the kinds of issues that are coming up regularly that her residents are bringing to her. Of course, we have a big Bangladeshi community here in Camden as well. And actually, Rabina and I have knocked on doors together in my wards to do some of that outreach work already. But there's no question that as a party, we need to do much more of it. And it's morally the right thing to do to talk to more of London's diverse communities. We can't take anyone for granted. We need to be inclusive and we need to understand their concerns and make sure that they are represented. We're also lucky, actually, that we have a really diverse list of GLA candidates. So I would be working closely with them, with the whole Liberal Democrat team, to make sure that we are reaching all the different communities of London and understanding what it is that they care about, what it is they want addressed. I also think it's important that we have headline policies that have a broad appeal for all Londoners. And that's a really challenging thing to do, actually. We've always found that a bit difficult in London campaigns, to find that one thing that everybody cares about and wants fixed. But I think if we can hone that down, then we will really distinguish ourselves and make sure that we have an offer that will appeal to everybody. So those are some of the things that I'll be doing. We've obviously got SAOs within the Liberal Democrats that specifically work on trying to improve diversity within our party. There's LDCRE, which Rabina's of course on the executive committee of, and Roderick Lynch chairs. There's the Racial Diversity Campaign as well with Deepa and Ade. And there's a new group that's been set up recently, which I'm a kind of honorary member of, and they haven't quite finalised their name yet. William will know what I'm referring to because he's in it as well, which is a kind of Black Action Group committee looking specifically at issues of concern to African and Caribbean communities. And I found that a really interesting learning experience. And I've been inputting into that and working with a whole range of people to make sure that those concerns are highlighted within our party, that everyone, you know, at the very top of the party is aware of it, from Mike Dixon, the CEO, to Ed Davey as our leader, but also to make sure that in policy terms, we are shaping policies and solutions that will address some of the fundamental inequalities that have actually been exposed in particular during this pandemic. We've seen how Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities have been disproportionately affected from a public health perspective. And as I said earlier, they're already being let down by a lot of Labour councils across London. And I think we need to be holding Sadiq Khan and Labour councils to account on that, and making sure we speak about that during the course of the campaign as well.
Thank you, Louisa. Let's find out from William what is happening in the chat.
Thank you, Isabelle. There are kind of a lot of questions. So I have done a sort of grouping at the moment about campaigning. So would you like, Luisa, for me to ask a set of 3 questions around campaigning for a start? Or you prefer me to ask them one by one? Okay, the first one is from Richard Flowers. When you are campaigning and someone asks why to vote for the Lead Dems, what is the one thing about Liberal Democrats that makes us different from other parties? Then I got another question.
Oh, sorry, you don't want me to take them
I got three sets of questions.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Or do you prefer to do one by one? Okay, the second one from Sadi. As a person who lives outside London, will Luisa be accommodating me or us? And will she allow us to travel and campaign with her as I live over 3 hours away and would love to campaign with Luisa?
Oh, thank you.
And another one about campaigning. I think I just have to go down. I'm trying to regroup all the campaigning together. It's coming down. Yeah, I think that's the one. Many members and activists are being bruised and dejected after the general election. And the uphill battle against our current government is kind of tough and discouraging or demotivating. How will you bring the motivation back to the activists and the members? This question is from, I think, Mira. Yeah. Mira from Wharton Forest. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to leave you with those three questions for now. If you still hungry or more, I'll bring you more.
Great. Let me see how much I can cover, how quickly. So to take Richard Flowers' question first, which is a good one. Richard is, of course, a constituency candidate in this election, so he's got a stake in it as well already. And this is often a challenge for us as a party. How do we distinguish ourselves from the two main parties, and even in London, from the Greens, because they tend to do quite well in London elections. I think one of the best things about our party, which I try to emphasise when I talk to people and explain what we stand for, is that we are inclusive. We seek to listen to people. We're not representing just one interest group or community. We believe in fairness. We believe in equality. We want to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. You know, no matter their race, gender, sexuality, how rich or poor they are. We believe in an inclusive approach to governance. That might not sound very sexy, but it's actually really important. And that's not the way that Labour or the Conservatives operate. They're very top down, and so are the Greens actually, who have quite a lot in common with the left of the Labour Party. We believe in communities. We believe in empowering individuals. We want to make sure that they are heard, and that's what I seek to emphasise when I explain to people what we stand for. But there are many more things you can point to about our values. But you asked for one, so I'm giving you that. I think you said the second question came from Sally. It wasn't Sadie, was it?
Sadie, I believe. Sadie.
Yeah, I think I know who you're referring to. Well, Sadie, thank you so much. That is really wonderful that you want to come and campaign for me and our whole Liberal Democrat team, I hope, because we have got assembly members that we need to get elected, and we've got a really good opportunity to do that. As for whether you should travel to come and campaign with us, let's see how the pandemic plays out, because I don't want you to put your own health and safety at risk. And obviously it looks like we're going into a second wave now, unfortunately, but there are plenty of other ways that you can support the campaign remotely. And indeed, many of us who are even in London right now may need to adapt the ways in which we campaign. We're not knocking on doors at the moment. At best, the contact we're having with voters is through street stalls, if it's physical. So there's phoning to be done. There's work in social media to be done, and as a young person, I would love to have you involved in the campaign and make sure that we're involving young members from across our party, because I think this is a really good opportunity to rally you all behind us and teach us a bit about how we can reach younger Londoners, because that's a group that we're performing quite poorly with, which leads me quite nicely onto disappointing general election results, because the analysis of that showed that young people are the cohort that tends to vote for us the least. So that's definitely something that we need to address. There were obviously many issues highlighted off the back of our general election campaign. Does it feel deflating and like an uphill battle? Of course it does. I think we all feel a little bit powerless, don't we? Because there isn't supposedly going to be a general election until 2024. And that's our next chance of actually getting rid of this awful government who are letting all of us down so much. But there may be a general election earlier than that. And that's why I think it's really important that we start building our foundations now, whether the general election is in 2024 or earlier. And the elections that we have in the run up to that are a key part of that process. So the London campaign is next year is not only an opportunity for us to do well in and of itself, but it's a bridge to local elections in London in 2022. And if we can win more councillors around London and hold on to the councils that we already control, we'll be in a much more solid position to win more MPs in London in 2024. So that's partly why I'm standing, actually. I'm taking a long-term view of this campaign. I want our party to be successful in London and beyond. And, you know, we've started that work of rebuilding from the ground up. I think Ed's doing a great job with his listening campaign. And, you know, let's have a good set of results in London, as well as, I hope, in Scotland and Wales next year, and goodness knows how many by-elections we might have as well, to show that the Liberal Democrats are back and we shouldn't be written off.
Thank you very much, Louisa. William, that was excellent grouping together of questions. That covered quite a lot of subjects within that particular topic, so well done. I can see more questions coming in, so you've got you're going to be quite busy.
There are some more questions. I wanted to ask Luisa some set of questions around road and transport. Have the first one from Suraj. How will Luisa work with other borough council in improving alternative means of transport, such as cycling or the rail, especially those living in the south of London and they don't have access to the tube? How will you work with them? How will you facilitate things for them? A question from Suraj. Another question around the same thing, probably with TfL. Yeah, I've got, sorry about that. I got many owners are being worried about the recent development around TfL. Sorry about that. I'm just swapped this one. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, that's one. What are your views on pedestrianisation for central London? Would you support a car-free day for London? I think we had a conversation earlier about that. And there's another one I saw about transportation. I'm trying to regroup them so that it will be easier for us so that we can cover as much we can. So bear with me, some of them I need to retrieve them very quickly. I saw something about the TfL somewhere.
William, if we just stick to 3 questions and don't worry about...
I just want to give the third one and then, because I gave 2 already, I just want to give the 3 of the set and that's it, if I can find it. Otherwise, I will let you start continuing. I'm conscious of the time as well. Yeah, I think you could go because I can't find the third one. There are so many questions, so maybe you can answer the 2, and by the time I find the third one, I will send it to you. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Fine. So if I've got all that correctly, There's the first one about working with councils and particularly the issues in South London and rail access. And then there's a second question about TfL developments, pedestrianisation and car-free days. Okay, so on the first one, well, it's really important that we work with, that the mayor works with local councils, in fact, which, as I mentioned earlier, isn't happening enough, and that all parts of London are listened to, because the accessibility challenges and the ways that people get around are very different depending on where you live in London. And indeed, particularly in the south of London, there's a reliance on rail networks that don't function very well, to be honest. People, before the pandemic, were often having to take trains that were delayed and cancelled. And, you know, that is incredibly frustrating for Londoners who just want to get to the office and get on with their day. So the mayor has an important role to play in speaking to those rail companies, demanding a better service. You know, as Liberal Democrats, we believe in competition. And a lot of these rail companies are failing us. So again, what the mayor can do is get the right people around the table and say, actually, this is not good enough. And as a representative of Londoners, I want to see a better service. Or your time will be up. As for other issues with TfL, of course we support greater pedestrianisation, but we also have to recognise that there is a balance. There's different ways that people get around. Car-free days, actually we don't have enough of them in London. I mentioned in my speech earlier that I used to live in Paris. Paris has car-free days really regularly, and that's something that we could be replicating in London. And in the mayoral role, I would use my contacts from around Europe. I know some former and current mayors of other cities and see what they're doing and how we can learn from them. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, actually. There are lots of good examples out there already, and templates for how we can improve our own city. Paris has also done a lot better than we have in terms of improving cycling lanes, the number and range that are available, and has managed to do that quicker than we have, including during this pandemic period. So that's another example that we can look to. Let's not forget, though, that not everybody can walk or cycle, and we need to make sure that we are inclusive. Older and disabled people are not able to get about in that way necessarily. So let's also ensure that we speed up bringing in electric buses so that our air is cleaner, but that people have other means of getting around on the public transport system, obviously subject to this situation that we're in and the need to socially distance.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Very quickly, I've retrieved the question I was looking for from Elliot. It's a very salient question. How would you prevent cyclists and e-scooters to be using the pavement and endanger the life of the vulnerable, or the children, or the elderly? Just a very short one.
Thank you. I think it's a really good question, because we've all seen kind of bikes strewn everywhere all over our local areas, and we want people to be cycling more, but we also need to make sure that they're not blocking streets for you know, families that are pushing buggies down the street, for people who need access to the streets if they are in a wheelchair, for example. And if we want people to walk around more, then that's obviously a barrier as well. So it is important that we address this. Actually, local boroughs have quite a lot of power in this regard. Here in Camden, the council is able to grant and take away licences. And so the mayor can work with local councils to make sure that the companies that we have introducing dockless bikes are operating in a way that is safe and works for everyone. And again, I think this is an area where competition has been beneficial, because the operators that haven't been doing it in a good way have soon been called out. We've seen lots of stories in the media about it. Londoners are very quick to call out issues, and lots of individuals will tweet pictures when they see a bike that's in the way. So I think kind of as a civic society, we can also hold them to account. It's not just formally through the mayor, and having other companies come into the market and doing it in a better way has also meant that business naturally flows away from the ones that aren't doing it in the right way. So there's a kind of a correction there.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Over to you, Isabelle.
Thank you for that. So Luisa, you mentioned in what you were saying, you were talking about more of us working from home due to the pandemic, and for many people that's become a way of life, and it's benefited both the employer and the employee. So we've had a question in from Kevin, and what he said is, during the lockdown, many people have had to adapt from working from home. As Mayor of London, would you lead by example by introducing the right for employees to request the right to work from home? I do have to correct that, because as a barrister, I have to say that employees do have the right to request. It's the employer who has the right to say no. So it's a slightly technical detail, but everybody does have the right to ask. But I think really what he's getting at is, do you want to lead by example as Mayor of London with your own staff, and perhaps setting that as the kind of gold standard of, actually, let's presume there is a right to work from home unless there is a really good reason for that not to be the case. So where do you stand on that, Luisa, and how would you actually implement it practically?
Yes, thank you, Kevin, for the question. You're right, the pandemic is speeding up in some ways changes that were already underway before. More and more people were starting to work from home even before this public health crisis hit us. For a lot of people, that's a good thing, people who need flexibility, particularly if you have childcare responsibilities. As a local councillor, I know what it's like to have to go to evening meetings that go on until 10 o'clock at night, that are, for some people, in buildings that are quite far away. So there's an upside to now being able to do those meetings virtually and spend more time at home. And actually, I'm somebody who has worked from home for years. I was self-employed for years, so I'm quite used to that. And I know lots of people, particularly my generation, millennials, who are doing that and are demanding greater flexibility from their employers. So some of these changes were already underway. I think we need to recognise that for some people, working from home is an attractive option. For others, it's less so, because some people also like the interaction of the office and being around people, and find it quite lonely and isolating to work from home. So I don't think we should be imposing a particular model on anyone. But yes, I think employers should be giving people more freedom of choice. We're liberals, aren't we? So we believe in that. And increasingly, that's what's happening anyway. I have a background as a financial journalist, and lots of the companies I know from the financial sector have said to their employees, not just work from home till the end of the year or next year, but even permanent work from home. And this is true across a number of sectors where people work in offices. But of course, that is not viable in every single industry. You know, the police can't do all their work from home, for example, nor can our NHS workers, who are doing such a good job of saving lives and keeping us safe. So we have to recognise those differences exist as well.
Thanks for that, Louisa. You have mentioned mental health, actually, so I think it's a good opportunity to ask you some more questions about that. Kevin, in fact, had said that working from home is probably desirable from the point of view of well-being and good mental health. And I just wondered whether you'd like to mention anything, any kind of work that you have done in the arena of mental health, or issues that you have come across specific to Londoners that you would like to highlight, because it would be interesting to find out more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really proud that as a party, we remember the importance of having good mental health, and we put that on a par with physical health, because all these things are actually interrelated. And if your mental health is deteriorating, your physical health can be as well. So I'm proud of the fact that we speak up for that, and we want to invest in equal services for mental health patients, as well as those struggling with physical ailments. In terms of the work that I've done, so particularly with residents in my ward, actually, a lot of the residents that I deal with who are facing problems with accessing decent housing also have mental health issues as a result of the stress of not having a permanent, secure home. That's kind of the number one thing you need for your well-being, and everything flows from that. So it's been really sad to deal with a lot of those cases. It's very frustrating because my powers to change that are limited. I obviously can intervene on their behalf and ask the council to look at their cases and try and do more about it. But we need to fix the housing crisis on a much wider level across London and beyond, in fact, in order to really tackle it. You know, one councillor or one council can't do that alone. So to see people suffering as a result of not having a decent home, often struggling on low incomes, these are all sources of anxiety. And I think it's really important that we talk about mental health in this campaign as well, because unfortunately, I suspect a lot more people will be suffering from anxiety with so many Londoners losing their jobs. There are friends of mine that are being made redundant every week, and we need to be speaking up for them.
Thanks for that, Louisa. Out of interest, I have asked this question of Ed and Layla when we were doing the Leadership Hustings and I was chairing that. But what is it that you do for your own well-being? How do you invest in yourself, and how will you do that, particularly during what will probably be quite a grueling campaign? So.
Thank you, very good question. I was an MEP and a councillor at the same time, so I know what it's like to be very busy and juggling multiple things at once. And it's a skill I've had to learn, actually, over time, of how to get that balance right between the work that I need to do and that I'm passionate about, as is the case with politics, of course. But also making sure that I look after myself and that people in the team are looked after as well. I think it's really important to lead by example and be saying to all the people that are helping you that they need to take time off as well. So that's something that I try to always keep in mind. Personally, I do a lot of yoga. I find that really helps me both mentally and physically to kind of stay in check, stay healthy, and I make sure that I make time for that. And it's really handy that there are lots of classes that are only 20 minutes that are available, but you'd be amazed what 20 minutes out of your day can do for your mental well-being.
It's funny, Layla gave the same answer. She talked about yoga as well. So clearly there is a yoga bug going through the Liberal Democrats. And it's something that I've started to do as well. It's the availability of all these brilliant online classes and being locked down and not being able to go to the gym, I suspect. But thank you for that. And I'm sure you will have a lot of fans joining you virtually, even if not in physical proximity. William, would you like to ask anything, 3 questions on one subject or just one question? But
I'm going to make it short because I'm conscious of the time, Isabelle, and I know that you are watching it very closely. I got a question around knife crime. As you know, Luisa, I've met you in other panel we have about youth violence, and I know that you're looking at into those areas. Youth violence has been a growing issue in London. And I got a question from Liz asking how you are intending to tackle knife crime in the capital and protect the vulnerable children. As you know, particularly in the council estate, there are rival gangs groups for drug territory, killing each other. So there's a drug war, basically. And is there any solution you are willing to bring on the table? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, this is so important that this is addressed because since 2016, knife crime has doubled in the capital. And I think it's an absolute tragedy. We are failing our young people. I think as a party, we've actually got some of the best solutions to this problem. And there isn't just one way to tackle it. It needs to be a multifaceted approach. You mentioned the drugs market there. Well, we are in favour of legalisation of cannabis. That will take drugs out of the hands of criminals and take power away from them who are often exploiting vulnerable young people and bringing them into that world. There's also a fundamental issue about poverty and lack of opportunity, and that's often why young people end up caught up very tragically in these kinds of circumstances. So as the party of equality of opportunity, we need to be speaking loudly for access to proper education, and also making sure that there are alternatives available for young people. Far too many of our youth centres have been closed, not just in London, but across the country, over 30,000 of them nationally. And reopening them should be a priority for the Mayor of London, because there are some amazing projects actually now reopening, driven by the voluntary sector, that they want to do, working with young people. And that's another thing that I think we're good at as a party. We respect those links. We don't think that local councils or the mayor or the government has all the answers. The voluntary sector already does great work and has those relationships and the trust of young people. But what they need is funding. And that's something that the mayor can at least call for and even provide. There are various funds to address these kinds of things. We're also the party that believes in community policing, and I think having police embedded in the communities that they serve and boosting local ward teams is a really important part of the equation as well. We know that this problem can't be addressed through enforcement alone, which is why we're not Conservatives, but having police that are known and trusted by local communities, who can gather intelligence, who are going to A&E departments and visiting young people when they've been victims of this to understand how this is coming about in communities. That's really important as well. And I think it absolutely has to be a priority. This is one of the worst crises that our capital is facing, and actually a number of those victims have been over the road from me, and we need to make sure that this is not allowed to get worse, and we should be offering all those solutions forward in Hustings, and I will be doing that as the mayoral candidate, and our GLA candidates can speak very authoritatively about this as well. Caroline Pigeon has already been doing that on the London Assembly.
Thank you, Luisa. Just before I hand over to Isabelle, just a quick one on the same theme there. In terms of the approach of the criminal justice system, which is a very important element in this issue, would you go for a punitive approach or a preemptive approach or preventative approach?
Our criminal justice system is not working. We know this, and as Liberals, we believe in tackling the root causes of how people get into a life of crime in the first place. There's also a fundamental problem of ethnic minority communities being disproportionately targeted by the police, and they are disproportionately affected in terms of sentencing as well, often receiving harsher sentences than white counterparts. That needs to be addressed, but it does kind of start from the beginning, and I'm glad that as a party we want to end suspicionless stop and search. We want to end the use of facial recognition technology. These are measures that penalise Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities the most, and we know that Black people in particular are stopped and searched far more than any other communities in London. That is fundamentally wrong, and if we address that, we're also preventing further down the line this disproportionate impact within the criminal justice system itself. We know that during the pandemic, fines for lockdown breaches were disproportionately handed out to ethnic minority communities, and more of them were arrested. That is wrong as well. So the mayor should be talking to the commissioner about addressing this issue. I think that's one of the areas where you could argue Met Police is institutionally racist, and that needs to be addressed. But also, during the course of the campaign, this is something we should be talking about, and Caroline is already doing that. I hope the whole team will as well.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Over to you, Isabelle.
Thank you. Thanks, William. Louisa, just some feedback on your comment about doing yoga. Charles has said that he would love to imagine Ed Davey doing yoga as well. Maybe we could set up some sort of group within the Lib Dems that will do yoga together. I don't know. So
Zoom yoga for Lib Dems.
It's a thought. Richard has commented, and he said very good on the mental health question too. And in brackets, he said, this must be very weird for you, not getting the audience feedback and applause. And I don't know, Richard, if you were addressing that to me or to Louisa or to William, but I'm not entirely sure that I have ever had applause when I've been chairing a Hustings. So yes, it's an interesting comment, but I think we're all getting very used to doing things by Zoom and very much being on a platform with no way of sensing whether people are frowning or laughing or applauding. So well done to everybody on the call thus far. You'll be pleased to know that we've just reached about 3:05, I think, in UK time for those who are watching from abroad. So we've got about 5 or 10 more minutes for questions before we move on to the closing speech. So we are in the home run, everyone. So I've got a question that's come in from Clive. Now, Louisa, you've talked quite a bit about environmental issues, what you do in terms of public transport, and you've talked about yourself having asthma and being aware of people being impacted by congestion and the results of that. And Clive's question is this: if you were elected as mayor, what would you have London do to play its part in combating the unfolding climate crisis. But he wants to know in practical terms. So if you were mayor and you had the power, what would you do about the climate crisis? And he wants a practical focus to that answer, please.
Sure. Well, the climate crisis is yet again one of the most urgent crises that is facing London and Londoners today. And it's another issue that requires a multifaceted approach. There isn't just one thing that we need to do. There's several things that we need to do in tandem, and that the mayor can do in their role. One of them is going further than the mayor's current ultra low emission zones. We can expand the areas that are covered to discourage car use. London is, well, actually the UK has broken EU standards on air quality, and this is a scandal. So we need to go further and faster than the mayor is currently doing, because the mayor is letting us down. Recognising that some people will still need and want to get around by car, we should be encouraging the introduction of more electric vehicle charging points across the city. That's something that local councils have control over, and the mayor in their role can be working with those councils to encourage them to introduce that. And indeed, there are pots of money that the mayor has control over that can be allocated to encourage boroughs to bring that about. Obviously, we've talked a bit about earlier about promoting more walking and cycling, and speeding that up. How I would look to examples from other cities about how we can do that better, improving pedestrianisation, more car-free days. One of the things they do in Paris actually is when the air pollution levels go over a certain level, public transport is made free on those days. I think that's quite an interesting idea. Obviously a little bit challenging with TfL's finances being what they are, but I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And anyway, the mayor should be demanding more support from government for our infrastructure system. We also need to speed up the introduction of electric buses. That's something that we can do to improve our air quality for people who rely on the bus network for their transportation. As a party, we want to cancel the Silvertown Tunnel, which is an unnecessary motorway that will add to the poor quality of our air. And actually the costs have rocketed for that project as well to £2 billion now. How is that a priority for the mayor today? Of course, we also oppose expansion at Heathrow and having a third runway there. Frankly, you know, the capacity argument has completely fallen out the bottom of that now, given that people aren't flying as much. And we need to make sure that the Tories do not try to put that proposal back on the table. But I think one of the best things the mayor can do is working with local councils to promote school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods, but doing it in a way that works for the local and business community as well.
Thanks for that, Louisa. And just underlining your message there, I work with somebody, I'm a trustee of the Paddy Ashdown Forum, and one of my fellow trustees is a keen environmentalist, and he showed me a beautiful photograph of the world during this pandemic and the difference, the stunning beauty of it, and a photo from 6 months before, and how cloudy and grey everything was because the visual couldn't get through to be able to see the seas or the mountains and take that photograph. So it was such a visual and very graphic image of quite what the impact of all of us going out travelling is doing. And I'm aware from what you've said that there are further ramifications that we haven't thought about, but it's great that you brought up an answer to a very important question for everyone. I just wanted to flag to those in the chat who are asking various questions, etc. Specifically Liz, Peter, Richard, you've asked about headline policies, and Louisa, don't worry too much, I'm not about to ask you a question. It's just to flag that you've asked about what headline policies Louisa would like to see us adopting as London Mayor. And I suspect, Louisa, that you will either have covered that in your opening statement or perhaps will cover it in your closing statement. So we won't spend time talking about that right now, because we probably have, I would say, one more question from William, if you would like to ask that. And then if I have time, I will ask another one. So William, if you would like to put a question forward, that would be great. Thank you,
Isabelle. The question is from Josh Lucas. There is a sizable Hispanic community in London. So most of them are workers or working class or small business owners. And the question is, how would you appeal to this demographic that you can often find around the Elephant and Castle, as an example? How would you appeal to them, and also to other minorities like this example I'm giving you?
Thank you for that question. Yes, one of the many important communities of London. Isn't it wonderful how diverse we are? So Caroline Pidgeon has actually already done quite a lot of work with the Hispanic community in London. She's doing a brilliant job of reaching out to all communities, considering she is our sole representative on the Assembly at the moment. And that's why we need to get more of them elected, to make sure that we're able to reach and represent more people. I think one of the things that the mayor can do actually is set up a kind of community task force looking at how do we reach and make sure we are representing all of London's communities. And this is something we can do on a party level for the campaign as well. Let's look into our membership and see who we have already, because actually we're more diverse than we think we are. I saw a really interesting presentation recently, kind of breaking down all the different communities that are represented within our party in London, and a lot of them are already there. So let's see who's in our membership. This is a great opportunity to get people more engaged with the campaign, and it's the right thing to do. So I will be working with them to understand what is important to them and ensure that their concerns are heard and represented.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Over to you, Isabelle.
Thank you. And just a reminder that if we do mention the names of anybody who's questioning, we'll only mention your first names. Apologies to anybody whose second name has been included, but it was in the excitement of the moment, and I'm sure that you don't mind, because at least one of you is candidate, so you've had a little plug for votes there. One thing that I would like to ask William to be aware of is I'm going to ask you in a second just to summarise some of the things that you've heard today for the audience as we wrap up, before I ask my final question. So be thinking about that, William, while I go to the last question that we've got, and this is from somebody who is based in East London. And the question is, how will you support the poorer local parties, particularly in East London, to help rebuild a Liberal presence there? And I suppose we can expand that really to across London, because there will be local parties that are not so, who don't have such a big membership and don't have such big finances coming in. What will you do to support those local parties?
So this is really important as well. As the mayoral candidate, I won't just be working with places where we have councillors or MPs. It's a campaign that is pan-London. We need to win votes across London. So just from an electoral perspective, we need to be engaging all our local parties. And we have a huge opportunity with this election to help build that infrastructure in local parties where maybe it's not as strong currently, because we might not have elected representatives, or, as is often the case, there are lots of local parties where there are just kind of a few people carrying all the work, and they do need our support to help them build up, because next year is also a bridge to the 2022 local elections that we have across London. And we've got an amazing opportunity to elect councillors for the first time in some areas where there are no Liberal Democrat representatives at all, and also to win back representatives in areas where we previously had them but have lost them, and to grow council groups where we have them in opposition. So I will be seeking to work with everyone. Obviously, things are a little bit tricky in terms of getting around physically at the moment, so I don't know how much that will be available during the course of this campaign. But as you mentioned earlier, Isabelle, we've all got used to working through and on Zoom. I can still do engagement. I can go to AGMs, happily meet with local parties over Zoom and hear what they need from us, as well as understand, you know, how they want to get involved in the London campaign more generally. So I will be listening.
That's great to hear, Louisa, particularly for me, I'm based in North East London, so we would love to have you.
Wonderful.
Lovely. So you'll be relieved to know, Louisa, that we've come to the end of the Q&A, so you can sort of relax. I have to say, partway through this event, we had been going for about an hour and 10 minutes, and I looked at my clock and I hadn't realised it had stopped, and it showed me that we'd only been going for 20 minutes. So my heart stopped at that point, but no, we have reached roughly 3:15. So what's going to happen next is we're just going to summarise what we've heard. William, hopefully you will be able to do that. And then Louisa, you will have the chance to do a closing speech. And as I say, a few people have asked about headline messages, so hopefully you'll be covering a bit of that. Just to say to all the people who've sent in questions, thank you so much to all of you for your comments and your questions. They've been really helpful, very, very interesting. I know that some of you will be disappointed because you didn't have the chance to have your question put. And just to flag to you at the end, I will be highlighting another event at which you can possibly repeat your questions, or perhaps the back office team are able to take some of the questions we didn't ask and use them as priority for the next time. But I just wanted to validate the fact that you have asked, and we have recognised that, and thank you for it. So I'll hand over to you, William. You've got 60 seconds just to summarise what you've heard today, please.
Thank you so much, Isabelle. I've been hearing some very good questions, important questions in our communities, particularly in terms of the crime, the youth violence, the crime, the knife crime, also the dynamic of different race and different communities, how to integrate them, how to support them, because most of them are facing issues of inequality. Also, there were some aspect of transport, and also how to protect our pedestrian, and also how to have a better sustainability of the air we are breathing in London by having some free car days event. I think those initiatives are very encouraging. Also, I'm kind of pleased the way the audience have been trying to be diverse in answering different type of questions in different areas, and hopefully they have drawn your attention and in your program and your policy to try to respond to the need in so many different areas. One of the most important area, I think, for the audience is particularly the area around the transport, and also campaigning, because there are a lot of questions about campaigning in terms of our party. Since the last general election, we need to find this motivation. We need to regenerate this machine, which has been probably paralyzed, probably due to the trauma of the last election. So we need a candidate to be able to bring all the activists, the membership around to the right direction. So the audience have been asking the key questions, and we hope that the candidate will meet them.
Lovely, thanks for that summary, William. Luisa, if you're ready, I would love to hand over to you so that you can give your closing speech. But everybody, please don't go and put your kettles on and get cups of tea yet, because we still have a little bit to wrap up after Luisa. So please stay to the end. But Luisa, I will hand over to you now.
Thank you. Well, I won't talk for too long because I'm sure everyone wants to get on with their days. But I just want to say thank you so much for all your questions. It's been really helpful to me to hear the issues that are of concern to our members and what you would like us to be focusing on. You know, that's part of how I will be seeking to engage with all of you, making sure that we are talking about the issues that you care about. Let's not forget that we're in a bit of an odd situation though, and there is a campaign in place already. There's staff in place, there are GLA candidates in place, there are councillors, activists, MPs, lots of people already working on the London campaign. And my job is to come in and help make sure that all parts of our party are involved in it. So we have heard throughout this discussion today that London's facing a range of urgent challenges. Many of you have raised them, have asked me questions about it, whether that's the climate crisis, a deepening recession, the pandemic, rising crime, higher levels of homelessness, and of course, too long ignored racial inequality. There are lots of ways that we need to go about fixing these crises, but a few of the things that I would like to focus on, I think thematically, what hangs all of these elements together, it's about tackling inequality. We're a party that believes in fairness, and too many Londoners are being let down by these really serious challenges, and frankly, parties that are not addressing them effectively. One of them is housing. I think it's critical that we are talking about that, and there are lots of aspects of the housing crisis that need to be addressed. For me, a personal priority is talking about how we would tackle overcrowding, because too many Londoners live in overcrowded homes, and actually this has increased the public health risk. And it's an issue that goes to the heart of structural racism as well, because here in Camden, for example, over 70% of people that are living in overcrowded housing are from ethnic minority communities. I think that's absolutely disgraceful, and we need to be calling Labour out for that, because there are failing Labour councils all over London. That's something that they are vulnerable on. And again, I mentioned that people think the mayor is responsible for housing, so let's make sure that we're holding him to account for that. And he does have a role to play in making sure that more decent homes are freed up for Londoners. The homelessness crisis is an absolute scandal. You know, this is 2020. Why all of us will be walking past people sleeping rough on the streets today? It's fundamentally wrong, and you can't build your life in any meaningful way if you don't have a roof over your head. So I think that goes to the heart of what we need to be talking about as well. We've also talked a bit about the very complex issues around crime and strengthening community safety. As the party that believes in community, that believes in the strength of communities, and that has been shown actually. One of the more positive elements about this horrendous pandemic that we have been experiencing is the way communities have come together. We believe in the power of what individuals and communities can do, and we need to be speaking to that. And let's and make sure that we are talking about the importance of the police being embedded in the communities they serve, because that will not only help them do their jobs tackling crime better in London, but also build trust and tackle some of those fundamental issues of racial inequality that have come up today as well. Sadiq Khan has failed to tackle any of these crises in a meaningful way. And Sean Bailey, like this government, is completely out of touch with Londoners and what we stand for, as we know from the many comments that he has made in public. And the thing that I want to get across to you is really that we've got no time to waste, because we owe it to Londoners. These are really urgent challenges, and we as a party, we know we've got lots of great answers to how they can be resolved. Let's start presenting that agenda and do it as soon as possible. Other parties are already out there campaigning. A leaflet from Sean Bailey arrived at my house last week. We haven't got any time to waste. Our voice is needed in the debate about the future of London. And as your mayoral candidate, I will be seeking to ensure that that gets heard. So really, I want to leave you on a note of appeal to join me. The really important thing is that we work together for a more liberal London. That's how we're going to achieve it. Just over a year ago, during the European elections, we had a really successful London-wide campaign that got me elected from third on the list. We can do that with our candidates if we are all working together. And I will use the relationships that I have at different levels of the party to harness that potential that we have. So please vote for me when ballots open on Tuesday so that we can hit the ground running.
Thank you, Louisa. And I have to say, comments have been coming in, one from Nancy in response to what you've just said, actually. And she said, brilliant when summarising for Councillor Luisa Porritt to highlight that the overriding issue that is so fundamental is inequality. And she goes on to talk about race and health inequality. So your message is definitely getting through. And, you know, we've cycled through quite a number of topics. And I think what I have got from this is the fact that you've taken notes and you're willing to listen and really help some of the comments and the feedback to help shape the campaign that you will run. And definitely, I think the audience will probably agree with me that, you know, we've heard very much talk about working as a team, working together, etc. So thank you so much, Louisa, for being here. It's been getting the chance to get to know you. I did have one comment from Tim, and he said, Isabella, you definitely have applause from me virtually for the way you have conducted today's hunting. And I'm assuming that's a spelling mistake, Tim, but Louisa, I hope
we're not conservatives.
I hope that you have not felt hunted, but you've been suitably challenged and tested, but that you've had the chance to put your case forward for us to vote for you. So thank you very much for that. Louisa, your bit of the programme is over, but please do stay. I just wanted to flag to everyone in the last minute or so that we have got that Louisa will be with us again on Monday. If you didn't have the chance to attend live today and you're watching a rerun of this, so you can join with us at 7 o'clock on Monday the 21st of September. Just go online to register, and that session will be chaired by Lord Dick Newby, and Sarah Olney MP will also be there asking questions. So that's just the day before we send out the ballot papers. And then the other event that I wanted to advertise, I think you've alluded to it, Louisa, is Friday the 25th of September at 5 p.m. We're going to have a really fun London Assembly's Q&A and quiz. So if you'd like to attend that, you can meet our candidates and find out all about them and talk about policy, politics, serious stuff, but also find out about them personally and talk about the fun stuff. So it just remains for me to say thank you to our fantastic technical team who have hidden behind the scenes and just made this event run so incredibly smoothly, and the London region for organising and managing this whole selection process. I'd also like to thank the returning officer and his team. He has been absolutely brilliant in terms of making sure we all follow the rules, including me, and it's been a delight to work with him. And William, you have done an amazing job. I'm sure that everybody would be applauding alongside Tim and everyone else for the way that you've been able to manage the chat and the questions. Not an easy job. nearly finally, I'd like to say thank you to Luisa. I know that you've probably got a very full plate of activity, but it's great to have been able to spend this part of our Saturday afternoon with you. And finally, possibly the most important thank you is to you, the viewers, people who have attended, sent in questions, sent in comments, and people who will then go on to share the news of this brilliant message that Luisa is putting forward in terms of what we can do if we select her as our candidate for mayor. The final thing that I would like to say before we log off is, as Luisa has said, the most important thing you can do now is go out and vote. Vote in this selection process. And again, the choice is between voting for Luisa as our mayoral candidate or a reopening of nominations. But it's really important that we have representation from across London in terms of what we want to do as a party for this important contest. So without further ado, I will close proceedings and thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this. Take care, everyone. Thank you.